Hi and welcome. In this video I will show you how to use Prorender in Cinema 4D R19. So it's very easy to use this new way to render your image. We will use a disk, a plane, okay, a circular plane and a sphere on it to show you how to use Prorender. Prorender use a sky, not a physical sky, but the sky. When you use a sky, you will have a nice HDR by default, and you will have a default light. So, the first thing that you can create is a new material, a new PBR material. It's a nice material for the Prorender. So you just have to click here, and if you double click on your new material, you can see that you have just a reflection and no color, no diffuse. So in reflection you have a default diffusion with a Lambertian. It's a nice way to have your color, and you have here a Beckman to have your specularity. So if you want to change the color, the base color, the diffuse of your sphere, you just have to change this color here. So for example, I will use this kind of color and I drag and drop. Now I will set up my scene and I will tell to Cinema 4D that I want to render my Prorender in this view. It's really simple. You just have to click in Prorender. Oh my god, because you have to go in your settings and select Prorender. Now it's done, and you can see that you can't use multipasses. The only multipasses that you can use with Prorender is the occlusion ambient occlusion. It's just another word, so you have to render your image with the global illumination, then the ambient occlusion, and mix them in After Effects, for example. So now I had selected my Prorender. I can activate it in this view. Prorender, use this view with Prorender, and I can click on this shortcut, Begin Prorender and select the quality. It's a shortcut for this quick render and this final render. So go. The first thing that do Cinema 4D is to compile your scene. So it will load your scene in your graphic card and compile all your material. It will take some few seconds or minutes. It depends if your scene are very lot of polygons or very simple. Now we can move in your Prorender. The first things I think it's very important to tell you, it's the fluidity of your view. If your computer is very slow when you're moving your camera in your scene, the first thing that you have to do is to go in your settings, Prorender, the second tab, and go in the scale, resolution scale, and decrease this value. If you go in 1 and okay, you will have something more interactive, more ugly but more interactive. I set it in 1, you will have no less scaling resolution for your first render of the first iteration. So Prorender will use some iteration. One iteration is one render of your frame. 100 iteration is 100 render of your scene. So more you will have iterations, the more defined small details you will have. So it's better to have big value of iteration to have less grain and on your area, on your render. You can see it's fast, but the render is very easy to calculate for your computer. The perfect sphere doesn't work, so you will add some more polygon to my scene. All settings are in this tab, in Prorender, and this or final render. You can use the quick render or the final render in your perspective view. But if you use the final render, some of options will work only if you do final render and click this button, and not work in your previous scene. But it will work, so many functionalities will work in your perspective view. Now I will show you what is the utilities of all this tab. Okay, so go in Aperçu and Mode de rendu. The type of render is the full render, or just a preview without shadows, and your ambient occlusion. So it's really easy to understand. You will render with this perimeters and create your ambient occlusion with this one, and this one we don't care. The depth of field, if you catch it, you will have some depth of field, but to have your depth of field you have to use a camera. So I will go in my camera, I will create another object to see my depth of field, okay, like this, and I will set up my depth of field point on my sphere. Okay, I'm going in physical render and trick my f-stop. If you put a low value, you will have more blur. If you put a very low value, you will have big blur. Big blur. Okay, so that's nice. It's very nice to use. It's very fast. It's very it's awesome. I really like this kind of blur, and you can set up it manually really easily. It's awesome. Okay, that's all for this depth of field. I don't know the English word for this, but it's really important. It's how many bounds will do the light. So if you set up 1, the light will go on your disk, on your sphere, bounce 1 time, and go in your scene. If you set up 10, your ray light will bounce 10 times. So it's really important if you have a specular material with some transparencies. So I will set up a glass material, and here we have a nice glass material. But if I have one here, we can see through your sphere because we have no bounces of your light. So the light can go through your sphere. So you just have to increase this value until you can see any changes. You can see some caustics. It's really nice render. Okay, now you have the ray amount of the ambient occlusion. It's really simple. You touch it and you see what it do. Anti-aliasing échantillon. I will show you this with a square. My square. Okay, my material. I zoom in. I deactivate my depth of field because I have a blur. Hop. Yes, it's really nice. Now we can see this horrible effect. We have this because we do not have any anti-aliasing. So if I increase this value, it will blur this kind of geometry. The anti-aliasing blur the geometry and the color contrast. So you do not have to have a big value here because the render time will be very slow. The difference will not be very effective. And if you have a filter size too big, you will have a scene totally blur and very ugly. For example, this kind of blur everywhere on your image, it's not good at all. So the anti-aliasing échantillon is how many information Cinema 4D will take on your pictures to calculate the anti-aliasing. Okay, I suggest to you to use a value between 1 and 3, which is very nice. The filter filter is the type of the blur, and the filter size is the size of your blur. So if you use the box filter, you will have a very large blur and very hard blur. If you take the black man Harris, you will have a blur more little, more précis. 2 seconds, please. Translate. Specific. Okay, you have more specific blur and with more details. If you have big value here, your render time will be increased. So I suggest you to use one box 0.5, and here you can't see the horrible effects, but you have very sharp transition between your object and color and on your scene. So it's a very nice setup for sharp render, or if you want something more smooth, I suggest you to use the black man Harris with a bigger value. It's a little more smooth if you take a Gaussian, for example. So it's just a preference. Next, écrêtage de la radiance. Creeping of radiance or clipping. Okay, this is really nice options because it's useful to disable your refraction. So it's really simple. When you activate this option, Cinema 4D will decrease the luminosity of the ray light who has been refracted or reflected. Here we have some caustics. These caustics are tricked by this option. If I decrease the value, Cinema 4D will decrease the luminosity of my caustics. If I increase this value, my caustic will be more luminous. You can see the difference just here. No light, no caustics. With big value, you have more caustics. Alors, you have to use this function, this option, to reduce your fireflies that you can see everywhere. Sometimes you have caustics with too much luminosity, so you just have to decrease this luminosity with this option. You have this in final render. You have another filter. It's the firefly anti-filter. It's post-production effects. Okay, so I will pass in final render. Okay, so I have all my fireflies, and I can activate my anti-fireflies. And if I decrease this value, Cinema 4D will destroy all fireflies. So if I put this value, we can see any difference. I don't know why, because it's not working on my computer. I see any difference. It's a post-production effect, so you can trick it when you want. Okay, let's continue. Stop the render. You can stop the render when 100 iterations are done, or in 10 seconds. Okay, you can understand. If you have some textures problem, you just have to increase this value here. If you see a lot of big pixel on your picture, you increase this value, but be careful, it will take more memory of your graphic card. If your textures are not in 8-bit but in 32 bits, you have to select this option. That's all. That's very simple. Okay, now we're going in final render, and we'll see the difference between quick render and final render. the same. The detail level. If you have a cloner with one sphere and 100 clone of your sphere, if you have 10% here, you will have 10% of your 100 clone. So you will have 10 clone. If you have here 2% of level of details, you will have 200 sphere. Even you have 100 sphere in your cloner. This option will trigger this kind of option. Basically, you have the same option with the standard and physical render in options. It's the same this option here. For me, it's totally useless, but you can use it when you are creating a big forest, for example, and you don't want to overload your scene, your preview scene. Okay, so go in Prorender and continue. Take it up. Field firefly, we don't care. The NDD, I do not remember, sorry. These two options is to allow Cinema 4D to apply this kind of text on your final image. If, for example, you drag your disk and put it here, you have disk here, and when you will do your final render, you will see the disk on your render. It's really nice options for people who want to destroy your render. And you will decrease this value to show you more quickly. Okay, wow, it's beautiful. Sorry. Up. Wow, it's so beautiful. Okay, so you can select a number of iterations, but here you have a very nice option. So you have to understand this option like a level of quality of your pic. So for example, I want to render this image with nice quality with no grain. Okay, so I put my final render with a say of 2%. Okay, I create my render. I will put 5 for a more fast render. Cinema 4D will calculate how many iterations he have to calculate to have your final render. So with 5%, it's depend of your scene to how many iterations you will have. So here my scene is very simple, so I will have less iteration. You can see it will use 400 iteration. Now I have a light who come near my sphere. So these lights will increase the complexity of my scene. So for the same quality of final render, I will need more iteration. If you set the same value here, Cinema 4D will use more iteration with the light and less iteration without the light, but you will have exactly the same quality of your render. So for me, for an animation, it's the best way to render your animation, because it's very adaptive. If you put a value like 0.1, the render time will be very awesome, very long. You don't do this. 1% is very low, 5 it's nice, 2, 3 it's a final render, very nice. So trick, test your render. Okay. Mettre à jour. Update your preview. So when you are creating a render, if I click here, you can see the preview is change all 10 iterations. If you do a render with 1000 iteration and one iteration here, you will see that the render will going slowly. It will be very slow because Cinema 4D have to charge to load your final image each iteration. And we don't care. So you can, it's your final render, but 100 here too, and create a render. And now you can see here that your iterations are going faster. It's very important to have big value here if you don't care to look after your render. Rendu par paquet. Delivered by packet. Render by packet. Okay. So if you are rendering very big image, okay, like this, your graphic card will not be able to render all this image in one time. So you have to use this option with packet size. So I just will show you like this. And Cinema 4D will render a little region of your image. You have your graphic card have to load all the scene, but it's an option to render a very big image. And the scene loaded in your image don't care about the size of your final image. So it's not an option to have a scene with more tree, for example, but it's an option to have a more big image. And resolution by default, okay, the same. Now here you have basic light. Okay, so I will show you what is this basic light. I will disable my sky, and the sky is just your reflection, it's just your HDR, and the basic light is this shadow. Cinema 4D creates the basic light just here with the sun of your base HDR. So mix your sky and your default light, you have already a nice scene ready for your first render. You can deactivate it, and normally you see nothing. Voila, you see nothing because you have no lights. You can use the PBR light. It's a very nice light for your Prorender and create your own setup. That's so beautiful. Okay, static noise. It's to have a static noise and non-static noise. Okay, it's nice to enable this option if you want to create an animation with very low iteration and a big grain on your image. The final render, the final animation will be less epileptic. This option is to set up the scale of your scene. For example, if you are creating a scene, okay, with a sphere, for example, another one, with a very low size. Where is it? Up. I press O. I can see it. It's too petit. Yeah. Here I have no shadows. When you have it's to help you to set up your sphere. If your scene is very big, you have to increase this value, and if your scene is very small, you have to decrease this value. For example, if I put this value, you have a problem in your render. When you have problem in your render, you have to trace this value. Basically, you don't have to touch it. If I get this one, You see the shadows are ugly. Here I have nice shadows. Here you have some problem in your shadows, so you have to set up your this value correctly. If you are creating a scene with default scale, like a human in 2 meters in the height and then 2 kilometers, you don't have to trick this value. This option doesn't work on my computer, but it will be able to you to choose which one graphic card you will use for the final render or for the quick render. So you can trick it, but it's changing nothing for me. So that's all that I have to do to you. Okay, I hope this tutorial helps you to understand what is Prorender for Cinema 4D. I hope you understand me. It's very difficult for me to speak in English for this kind of video. I'm working my English. I'm trying to do my best and to offer you some English tutorials. I may ask you to come in the Facebook group Motion Designers Community, where you will be able to share your work and ask some questions if you do not find the answer on Google or YouTube. So, hope to see you soon. I hope you like. Do not forget to subscribe and like the video. And if you have any kind of question, feel free to comment this video. So, ciao and see you.